My name is Noelle Hartley, and this is not the story I ever wanted to tell. But it's the one I lived, one forged quietly in the corners of family dinners and birthday cards, filled with guilt instead of love. I've learned that betrayal doesn't always look like someone walking away. Sometimes it looks like someone leaning in arms wide, voice warm, while quietly pulling the floor out from under you. They say family always has your back. Mine used mine as collateral. They faked my name on 6 loans. 6. Some were small, others had commas, but all of them were wrapped in lies. Lies with my signature forged in ink that smelled like a lifetime of trust set on fire. But before the fire, there was the silence. The kind of silence you train yourself to live inside when you've been told your whole life that sacrifice is just what good daughters do. That if you're strong, you don't complain. That if you're smart, you'll figure it out. That if you love your family, you'll understand. But there's a thin line between love and leverage, and they crossed it with a pen. It started slowly. The first loan was easy to miss. A $40. 0 line of credit that I never opened. It showed up one December, tucked inside a routine check on my credit score. I laughed at first, thought it was a glitch. I was careful, responsible. I had a spreadsheet for everything. But I didn't question it, because questioning it meant questioning them. And I wasn't ready to do that yet. I called my mother. Probably a mistake. She said, "You're so smart with all your finance stuff, you'll fix it in no time." Her voice was smooth, polished, familiar. So I believed her because I had always believed her, because I wanted to. But belief is a dangerous thing when it's placed in the wrong hands. The second loan came 6 months later. Then the third, then the fourth. By the time I found out about the 6th, I had missed mortgage pre-approval on my first home. My debt-to-income ratio had exploded. My credit score, once pristine, was bleeding out in real time. I sat in my car outside the bank, fists trembling on the steering wheel. I had just been told, "We're sorry, Ms. Hartley. You've been flagged as high risk." That word echoed. Risk. How could I be the risk? I had never missed a payment, never defaulted, never borrowed more than I could repay. But someone else had, someone with my social security number, my name, my trust. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the kitchen floor in the dark, staring at the ceiling. I counted every time I'd said yes to helping, every ride I gave, every rent I covered, it's just a temporary thing that turned into a permanent drain. And I realized something. Love given without boundaries isn't love. It's currency. And I had been giving mine away for free. The next morning, I asked for the loan documents, and when they arrived thick, legals, heavy, I didn't see my signature. I saw Diane's handwriting. Neat. Familiar. Too perfect. She even dotted the I in Hartley, the way she always did when signing birthday cards, a small upward stroke, like a heartbeat at the end of my name. And just like that, my stomach turned. I knew before I confronted her. Before the tears, before the justifications, before the weaponized guilt. Caleb, my brother, was the one they always worried about. Couldn't hold a job. Couldn't stay clean. But he's trying. That's what Mom always said. He's trying, Noelle. He just needs a little help. So they helped him with my name. My identity became a lifeline for the son who couldn't swim, and a safety net for the parents who refused to let him sink. But while he stayed afloat, I was drowning. Serena was the first person I told everything to. She was my best friend and a contracts lawyer. Sharp, methodical, no patience for emotional abuse disguised as family dynamics. She came over that night, saw the papers spread across my dining table, and said, "Noelle, this isn't just unethical. This is felony-level fraud." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because hearing someone else say it made it feel real. She didn't say, "They didn't mean it." She didn't say, "Try to talk to them again." She said, "This is fraud." And that was the moment the scale tipped. I had always been good at pretending. Pretending I didn't notice the withdrawals, the missing receipts, the credit card mailers addressed to Mrs. N. Hartley that arrived with no explanation. But pretending was over. I faked my forgiveness for months. I smiled at dinners. I picked up their calls. I nodded when Mom said, "I knew you'd understand." I waited. Patient. Precise. Until I had every document, every forgery, every account tied to mine with a forged thread. And then I made the call. "Detective Rowan," she said, picking up on the second ring. She didn't sound surprised. In fact, I think she'd been waiting for someone like me to finally stop covering tracks that weren't mine to hide. "I'm ready to file a report," I said. "It's identity theft. 6 confirmed loans, all forged, all under my name." Her voice sharpened. "Do you know who did it?" I didn't blink. "Yes." I said, "My family." She was quiet, not from disbelief, but recognition. Because this happens more than people like to admit. Not all villains wear masks. Some wear wedding rings and tuck you in at night. Detective Rowan met me in a small interview room downtown. No windows, just a gray table, 2 chairs, and a hum in the ceiling, like a wire always on the verge of snapping. She wore plain clothes, not a badge in sight, but she carried herself with the kind of clarity that made you sit up straighter without knowing why. "I've seen this before," she said. Flipping through the folders, I brought photocopies of forged loan applications, side-by-sides of signatures, screenshots of account activity, but not with this much preparation. Most victims walk in with a gut feeling and a breakdown. You brought me a timeline, a motive, and a damn thesis. I didn't smile. I had time. I said, "They gave me 10 years of it." She glanced up. "You ready for what comes next?" I didn't ask what she meant, because deep down, I already knew. The investigation moved quickly. Quicker than I imagined it could. Maybe because the evidence was airtight. Maybe because I had every date, every dollar, every forged line item already cataloged. Maybe because Rowan had seen too many people crushed under the weight of, but their family. She wasn't interested in excuses. She wanted accountability. 3 weeks later, my mother was brought in for questioning. She folded within the hour. Not out of guilt, out of fear. Because fear is the only thing that ever made her change. Not love. Not conscience. Just fear of being exposed. She told them she did it for Caleb. That she never meant to hurt me. That she thought I'd forgive her. That I always had more and was better with money. And what's the harm in helping your own blood? As if ethics could be explained away by proximity. Caleb denied everything. Of course. Claimed he had no idea. Claimed he never asked for anything. But the loan deposits into his Venmo said otherwise. Ray, my stepfather, said nothing. Just sat there, arms folded, face frozen like marble. Like if he didn't speak, he wouldn't leave fingerprints on the wreckage. But silence is its own form of guilt. They were arrested the next day. 3 counts of financial fraud. 2 counts of identity theft. 1 count of conspiracy to defraud. The news hit our neighborhood like a dropped match. People whispered at the grocery store. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly remembered me in vivid detail. And through it all, I stayed quiet. Not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I had spent my entire life explaining my choices. My tone. My boundaries. Trying to earn peace in a house that only gave it when things were broken beyond repair. Now, I had proof, and it didn't require my permission to speak. Still, the night before their arraignment, I didn't sleep. Not from doubt. From grief, because you don't celebrate the funeral of your illusions. You mourn them. You sit in your car in a dark driveway and stare at the house that raised you and realize it was never home. It was just a place where you learned how to survive. I watched them enter the courtroom the next morning. Orange jumpsuits, shackled hands, averted eyes. And still, part of me hoped for one thing, not an apology. Just acknowledgement, but all my mother said, before being led away, was, "You didn't have to go this far." And I smiled. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Because she was wrong. I didn't go far enough. The aftermath wasn't loud. It came in emails from the DA, court updates, restitution hearings, The bank reversed most of the loan damage. My credit report was flagged with a victim statement and a fraud alert. A long process, one that would take years to clean fully, but the foundation was laid. And with it, something else emerged. Clarity. I began writing again. Journals turned into blog posts into essays, essays into speaking invitations. People wanted to hear what I had to say, not because I was special, but because I had done the one thing they feared most. I had told the truth out loud, and I had survived it. One night, after a panel on financial abuse and family trauma, a woman in her 60s came up to me. Her hands trembled when she handed me a folded piece of paper. On it was a list of transactions her son had made under her name. I never thought anyone would understand, she said, but now I think maybe I'm not crazy, and that, more than any courtroom verdict, was the victory, not just justice, but recognition, the kind I never got when I was paying for Caleb's bail, or Mom's prescriptions, or Ray's home improvements. The kind that says, you're not bitter, you're not cruel, you're just done. Months later, I got a letter. Caleb. Handwritten, sent from prison. He said he forgave me, said he hoped I was healing, said maybe we could reconnect when all this blew over. I tore it up and threw it away. Not out of hate, out of love for myself, because forgiveness doesn't always mean reconnection. Sometimes it just means letting go without reopening the door. I still get asked if I miss them. The answer, I miss the idea of them, the idea that family protects. That love is a shield, not a weapon. But ideas don't pay off fraudulent loans. Ideas don't testify. Ideas don't sleep on the kitchen floor, wondering how long it'll take to rebuild a name that wasn't even lost, just stolen. I miss what I deserve to have. But what I have now? Peace. A bank account with one name on it. A home without lies in the walls. And a truth I will never again apologize for. They faked my name. So I faked my forgiveness. And then I let the system do what it was always meant to. Hold people accountable no matter whose blood they share. The strange thing about healing is that it doesn't arrive like a grand announcement. It sneaks in quietly. It's in the first night you sleep 8 hours without checking your phone. It's in the moment you open your banking app and don't flinch. It's sipping coffee without doing math in your head. It's walking into a room and knowing no one in it holds a knife behind their smile. That's how it started for me. Not with triumph, but with space. And for the first time in my adult life, I filled that space with things that weren't about survival. I took a new job. Smaller firm, smaller team. They knew my story. I didn't hide it. And they didn't treat me like I was fragile. They treated me like someone who knew how to detect risk because she had lived it. My experience wasn't a liability. It was credibility. Serena was the one who said it first. You know, you could build a whole practice around this. Right. I raised an eyebrow. Financial abuse coaching. Fraud prevention. Speaking tours. You're already doing the work, you might as well put a name on it. I laughed. I'm not a brand, but the truth is, I was becoming something I'd never been before. Visible. And that's terrifying when you've been trained to disappear in service of everyone else's comforts. But I leaned in. I launched a podcast. Called it Signed, not mine. First episode. My own voice raw. Unfiltered. I was raised to be the fixer. The good daughter. The one who solved things quietly. Until the day I realized the thing I had to fix was the idea that silence equals strength. Within a month, I had 200,000 downloads. Within 3, I was being asked to keynote conferences. And somewhere in the whirlwind of microphones and headlines and private messages from strangers, I realized this was never just my story. It was an epidemic dressed as a family tradition. 1,000 different faces with the same bruise invisible, inherited, and dismissed. And I was done pretending it didn't exist. The final court date arrived on a Thursday. Restitution hearing. I didn't expect them to show, but they did. Ray looked older, thinner, but no less defiant. Caleb didn't make eye contact once. And my mother, she looked at me like she still didn't understand how I could do this. As if the betrayal was mine, not hers. As if by saving myself, I had sentenced them. The judge asked if I had anything to say before the order was finalized. I stood. I took my time. And then I said, I am not here to be cruel. I am not here to humiliate. I am here because my name was used like a tool without my consent, without my knowledge, and without a moment's pause. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Repeated, documented, and weaponized. And today, I reclaim it. I looked them each in the eye. And I don't need your apology. I just need your distance. The gavel came down. They were ordered to repay a portion of the damages, but I knew I'd never see that money. That wasn't the point. The point was, the lie was no longer mine to carry, and neither were they. I moved cities 6 months later, not to run, but to breathe deeper. Started a firm with Serena Financial Consulting for survivors of family fraud. We named it Hartley & Rowe. On the wall in our office, framed in gold leaf, hangs one quote: "When they use your name, they steal your voice. When you take it back, you give others permission to do the same." People walk in every day with stories that mirror my own. Single moms, retired veterans, teenagers just learning how to check a credit score. We don't just rebuild numbers. We rebuild narratives, because healing isn't transactional. It's architectural. A year after the final sentencing, I got another letter. This one wasn't from Caleb. It was from his girlfriend. Her handwriting was messy, nervous. She said she'd found my podcast, that she didn't know what he'd done, that she was scared not of him, but of becoming me. You talk about debt like it's a symptom. She wrote, but for me, it's always felt like a birthright. That sentence haunted me, because that's exactly how I used to feel. Like my last name came attached to a bill I didn't ask for. So I wrote her back, told her what I wish someone had told me at 23. That love without boundaries isn't noble, it's dangerous. That self-preservation isn't selfish, it's sacred. And that walking away isn't weakness. It's proof you finally know your worth. Today, when people ask me if I'm angry, I say no. Anger burns hot. Fast. Loud. What I feel now is colder. Sharper. Clearer. Not a blaze, a blade. A precision that says, I will not be used. I will not be silenced. I will not confuse loyalty with self-destruction ever again. And that's not vengeance. That's power. Because they faked my name on 6 loans. And I faked my forgiveness until the police showed up. But I don't fake anything anymore. I don't smile when I'm bleeding. I don't nod when I mean no. I don't cover crimes with kindness. I tell the truth, out loud, even when it costs me comfort, even when it costs me family. Because if love requires silence in the face of theft, then it's not love, it's ransom. And I'm nobody's hostage anymore. I once believed that survival meant being agreeable, being flexible, being the one who keeps peace even while standing in the wreckage. But survival, I've learned, has a different face. It's the woman who walks into a courtroom without shaking. It's the voice that doesn't quiver when speaking the truth, no matter who's listening. It's not wearing armor, it's becoming it. And I didn't become steel because I wanted to. I became it because I had to. Because there comes a moment when the pain of betrayal becomes louder than your fear of being alone. That moment happened for me not in court, not in confrontation, but in the silence after everything ended, after the headlines faded, after the text messages stopped, after every excuse and lie collapsed under the weight of their own repetition. It happened in the quiet, the kind of quiet that demands you rebuild not out of revenge, but out of reverence for who you could have been if they hadn't broken you first. And so the firm took off faster than either Serena or I expected. We were inundated with people, not clients. Survivors. They came with shame in their eyes and paperwork clutched to their chests like confessionals. They didn't need just legal help. They needed to hear, you're not crazy. They needed someone to say, you're not overreacting. That was abuse. And we did, every day. With every intake form, every coaching call, every seminar. I remember one woman late 40s, soft voice, shaking hands. Her son had opened 4 credit cards in her name. She whispered to me, but I must have raised him wrong. And I took her hands and looked her in the eyes and said, no, he chose wrong. You didn't make him. He made that decision. She broke down crying. Because that was the first time someone had lifted the weight of guilt that wasn't hers to carry. And that's the thing about abuse in a family system. It's not always physical. Sometimes it's signatures and silence and smiling while bleeding. I became the person I once needed. And every time someone thanked me, I wanted to go back to that night on the kitchen floor. Back when I thought my life was over, and whisper, this pain will one day become your platform. But even platforms shake. One afternoon, I got a message request on Instagram from an account I didn't recognize. It was my mother. New profile. New last name. The message was short. You've said enough. Let it go. You've embarrassed us enough. I stared at the screen for a long time, not angry, just stunned. Because even after everything, even after court records and arrest reports and loans, I'm still paying off. She still believed that silence was the price of love. I didn't reply. I blocked the account. Then I opened my journal and wrote, you don't get to gaslight someone into grief. You don't get to cause the wound and then tell them how loudly they're allowed to cry. You don't get to play the victim just because someone else told the truth. And you don't get to rewrite the story just because you're no longer in control of the pen. Years passed, and still, the work grew. We launched a scholarship fund for young women rebuilding their credit after family betrayal. We hosted webinars for elder financial abuse, student loan scams, and credit safety. And I wrote every day until one day, I got an email from a publisher. Your blog changed my life. It said, ever thought about turning it into a book? I hadn't, but maybe it was time. Not to relive the pain, but to document the survival. Because I didn't want the next Noelle to spend 10 years thinking her suffering was just part of being a good daughter. I named the book The Signature Wasn't Mine. It wasn't a tell-all. It wasn't revenge. It was a roadmap. It was a hand extended backward to anyone still trying to climb out of the pit. I included chapters on trauma-informed budgeting, on how to spot red flags in family requests, on rebuilding credit and dignity at the same time. But mostly, I included truth. Ray, uncomfortable, cleansing truth. The kind that lights fires under silence. The kind that says, your life begins the day you stop being useful to people who don't love you. And when it hit the shelves, I thought maybe 5 people would read it. Instead, it became a bestseller in 3 months. Emails poured in, interviews followed, and every time I sat across from a host and they asked me, what do you want people to take from this? I said the same thing. It's not unloving to say no. It's not betrayal to protect yourself. And it's not weakness to walk away from people who smile while they take everything you've built. I still live alone, still make my coffee the same way every morning, still keep all my accounts 2-factor authenticated with a password that includes the date I made the police report. Not because I'm afraid, but because that date is sacred. It was the day I reclaimed me. Not just my name, not just my money, but the version of myself that doesn't flinch, doesn't fold, and doesn't fund dysfunction just to earn a seat at a table that was never safe to begin with. And if you're watching this, and some part of you is aching, nodding, remembering, I want you to know, you're not alone, you're not overreacting, and you don't need one more excuse to leave behind people who treat your trust like a credit limit. Let them say you're cold. Let them say you're selfish. Let them say you're hard, because you know what you are, free. And no one fakes freedom. You either have it or you don't. And today, I have it in full. There's a strange kind of peace that comes after war. Not the loud kind. Not confetti or parades or clinking glasses. It's quieter than that. More sacred. It's the way your breathing slows when you realize no one's coming to take anything else from you. It's unlocking your front door and knowing no one inside expects you to shrink to make them feel bigger. It's seeing your own name in the mirror and finally recognizing it. For most of my life, my name wasn't really mine. It was a tool, a transaction, a placeholder for someone else's decisions. But today, it's mine in full. Not because a judge declared it, not because the credit bureau cleared it, but because I claimed it. Piece by piece, boundary by boundary. No be no. And what remains now isn't bitterness, it's legacy. A few months ago, I visited a local high school to speak to a group of seniors about financial literacy. I didn't bring my usual slides. Instead, I brought the first loan statement they forged in my name. I held it up. This, I said, is what it looks like when love is used as camouflage for theft. The room went still. Some shifted in their chairs. One girl started crying quietly. I set the paper down. And this, I continued, is what it looks like when you take your voice back. I held up a copy of my book, signed it, gave it to her. Later, she told me her uncle had used her identity to rack up 20,000 in debt before she turned 18. She thought she was stupid, thought she'd let it happen, thought it was her fault. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "They trained you to feel responsible for their chaos, but you are not their scapegoat. You are their reckoning." I still get letters. Not from them. From people like you, people watching this, people whispering, "That was my idea," or "That was my name," or "That was my account." My dream. My chance until they took it. And to all of you, I say this: you're not alone. You're not weak, and you're not imagining it. If they needed you to stay quiet about what they did, that's how you know it was wrong. Let that be your confirmation. Not their apologies, not their excuses, not your bloodline. Just that a friend once asked me if I'd ever forgive them truly. I paused before answering. Because forgiveness is a complicated thing when the scars still send notifications to your phone every time a debt collector calls. But here's the truth. I don't think forgiveness always looks like hugging it out. Sometimes it looks like changing your number. Sometimes it's never going back to Thanksgiving. Sometimes it's healing so completely that their lies don't even sting anymore because they have no place left to land. I don't wish them harm. I just don't give them access. And that, to me, is forgiveness. It's the boundary that says, I release you from my life, and I release myself from the belief that I ever needed you to love me right. I am not the victim of a story anymore. I am the author of one where my name isn't forged. My silence isn't expected. My worth isn't conditional. One where the truth doesn't tremble when spoken. One where survival isn't the ending, it's the beginning. And now, I live for the beginning. For the mornings with soft coffee and unopened mail that doesn't steal my breath. For the clients who walk in crying and leave walking taller. For the moments where I remember that I didn't just survive a crime. I dismantled a legacy of manipulation. I burned the script, and I wrote a new one. If you're watching this right now and you feel that ache, that silent grief, that deep, buried guilt for even considering walking away from people who've used your kindness as capital, hear me. You don't owe anyone your peace just because they share your last name. You don't owe anyone your credit score, your passwords, your pension, or your silence. You were not born to be a blank check for people who cash in on your guilt. You were born to live free, and that starts with telling the truth, even if your voice shakes, even if they say you're dramatic, even if they call you ungrateful. Because the only people who get angry when you set boundaries are the ones who benefited from you having none. I'll leave you with this. They faked my name on 6 loans, and I faked my forgiveness long enough to build my plan. But when the police showed up, so did I. Not broken. Not bitter. Not begging for anyone's understanding. I showed up with evidence. With clarity. With power, and that is how I won. Not with rage, but with resolve, not by screaming, but by speaking clearly, calmly, truthfully, until their lies had nowhere left to hide. That's the real revenge, to stand tall in the life they tried to destroy, and make it beautiful anyway. This was my name, this is my voice, and no one gets to fake either of them again.